Your phone is pressed against your ear, and the man on the other end of the line is screaming. You do not raise your voice back. You are sitting in a rented office room above a dentist clinic in Youngstown, Ohio, room 4B, no sign on the door, just a plain number screwed into old wood. It is 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. An ancient radiator knocks softly against the wall behind you. On your desk sits a thick manila folder, the edges worn soft from handling, with a single line typed across the tab. Case number 2019 CV0417. The man on the phone is telling you he will never pay. He is telling you this debt is dead, that it happened 6 years ago, that nobody has called him about it in years, that you have no right to even be on this call. You let him finish. Then you tell him the number. $41,000. That is what the court says he owes. That is what you now legally own the right to collect. And here is the part that makes his voice crack on the other end of the line. You paid $2,300 for it. You bought his entire debt, his entire legal obligation, for less than the price of a used car, from a company that had already given up trying to collect it. He says it again, quieter this time, that he'll never pay. You already did. Not the debt. The purchase. 3 weeks ago, on a laptop at this same desk, you clicked one button and became the legal owner of his $41,000 mistake. You do not do this once. Right now, sitting in a single drawer of a locked filing cabinet beside your desk, there are 14 folders just like his. 14 judgments. 14 people who owe a combined total that crosses well past 6 figures. All of it purchased for pennies on the dollar. All of it sitting quiet and legal and completely invisible to anyone who has ever looked at you and assumed you don't work. You own 13 coin machines worth of nothing. You own something far stranger. You own debt itself. The man's voice goes flat. He asks what happens now. You tell him calmly that you're willing to talk about a payment plan. $50 a month. No lawyers. No wage garnishment, not yet. He goes silent on the line. You already know he'll say yes. You look, for a moment, at your bank account open in a second tab on your laptop screen. The number sitting at the top reads $1,300,000 exactly. 11 years of buying what other people gave up on. Nobody in this town would guess it by looking at you. They just see a man who never seems to have anywhere to be. You hang up the phone. You slide the manila folder back into the drawer, next to the 13 others, and you close it slowly, the metal drawer clicking shut with a small, ordinary sound. Then you stand up, walk to the small kitchenette in the corner of the office, and rinse out a coffee mug that was already clean. You were 26 years old the first time you saw a stack of case files sitting in a cardboard box that nobody wanted to touch. You worked as a file clerk at a small law firm on South Main Street in Akron, Ohio, a place with dropped ceiling tiles and a copier that jammed twice a day. The box sat against the wall near your desk for months, the cardboard corners torn soft from being moved around. A strip of masking tape across the top with the words, "closed/inactive," written in faded blue marker. You asked about it once. Frank Delgado, your supervisor, a heavy-set man who wore the same navy blazer every single day of the week, told you those were judgments the firm had already won in court, but never bothered collecting. He said chasing people for money was beneath the firm, that real lawyers didn't do paper chasing, and that you should focus on filing instead of asking questions above your position. You went back to filing, but you kept looking at that box. At the time, your checking account held exactly $340. You owed $8,700 in student loan debt, and you had been making the minimum payment of $94 a month for 3 years, watching the balance barely move while the interest quietly ate whatever progress you thought you were making. You lived in a one-bedroom apartment on Bellflower Avenue with a window unit air conditioner that only worked in the bedroom, not the kitchen. Frank Delgado told you once, during a slow Friday afternoon, that people like you needed to be realistic about where your life was headed. You said nothing. You just kept filing. One evening, after everyone else had left the office, you opened that cardboard box and started reading through the files one at a time. Judgment after judgment. Court paperwork proving that real people, real businesses, owed real money to other real businesses. Money that had simply been abandoned because collecting it took time, and time cost the firm more than the debt was worth. You found one file that stuck with you. A small auto repair shop on Kelly Avenue was owed $9,400 by a former customer who never paid for a transmission rebuild. The shop had won the judgment in court 2 years earlier. Nobody had ever tried to collect a single dollar of it. You called the owner of the shop directly, on your own time, using your own cell phone. His name was Gary Hutchins. He sounded surprised that anyone from the firm was even calling. You asked him carefully if he would be willing to sell the judgment outright, for cash, right now, instead of waiting for money that might never come. He asked how much you were offering. You told him $1,100. He said yes almost immediately. You did not have $1,100 sitting in your account. You borrowed $600 from your cousin Aaron and put the rest on a credit card with an 18% interest rate, the same card you had promised yourself you would never use again. Nobody at the firm knew you did this. Frank Delgado walked past your desk the next morning, coffee in hand, and told you, the way he always did, that people who wanted a real future needed to stop wasting time on side projects and start taking their actual job seriously. You just nodded. You did not tell anyone what you were doing for the next 4 years. You kept your job at the firm, filing the same paperwork, answering the same phone calls, watching Frank Delgado walk past your desk every morning with the same navy blazer and the same tired opinions about what people like you should be doing with your life. But at night, after your shift ended at 5 p.m., you drove to the Summit County Courthouse on High Street and sat in the public records room until it closed at 8 p.m., 3 nights a week, reading through civil judgment filings that nobody else had bothered to look at in years. You built a spreadsheet on an old Dell laptop with a cracked hinge, 1 column for the debtor's name, 1 for the amount owed, 1 for the date of judgment, and 1 for how long it had been sitting untouched. You learned that most companies stopped trying to collect after 18 months, not because the debt disappeared, but because chasing it cost more in time and legal fees than the debt itself was worth. You learned to see what other people threw away. The Kelly Avenue judgment, the one you bought from Gary Hutchins for $1,100, took you 11 months to collect. You called the debtor once a month, never aggressive, never threatening, just steady and calm, offering a small payment plan of $75 every 30 days. By the end, you had collected $2,100 total. It was not a fortune. It barely covered what you had borrowed and the interest on the credit card. But it was proof the mechanism worked. You used that first small profit to buy a second judgment, this time from a landscaping company on Diagonal Road that was owed $6,200 by a former commercial client. You paid $850 for it. Then a third, then a fourth, each one a little larger, each one bought from a business too tired or too busy to keep chasing money they had already stopped expecting to see. Marcus Whitfield worked 2 desks over from you at the firm. He got promoted to office manager the same year you bought your 4th judgment, and he celebrated by leasing a 2022 Chevrolet Silverado for $610 a month, the kind with the chrome trim package and the leather seats that still smelled like the dealership showroom. He parked it in the same spot every morning, close to the front door, so everyone walking in would see it first. He talked about the truck constantly. He talked about his new title. He talked about how he was finally moving up in a way that mattered. You never told him what was sitting in a locked drawer at your apartment. 11 case files by then, each one a small, quiet asset that nobody at that office could see, worth far more combined than the truck payment Marcus proudly showed off every single day. You kept driving your same 2014 Honda Civic, the one with 121,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for 2 years because you already knew what was wrong with it and didn't feel like paying someone else to tell you the same thing. Currency does not care what you drive. By your 4th year of buying judgments quietly on the side, your total collected income from the practice had grown to $31,400. All of it reinvested into buying more judgments, larger ones, from businesses that had simply stopped believing the money was ever coming back. Frank Delgado still thought you were a file clerk with no ambition. You let him keep thinking that. But here's the part nobody saw coming. 5 years into buying judgments quietly on the side, an envelope landed on your desk at the firm, forwarded from the accounting department upstairs. It was a notice about an old client account being written off as uncollectible. You almost didn't open it. Files like that crossed your desk constantly, and most of them meant nothing to you personally. This one did. The case number matched a client the firm itself had represented 6 years earlier. A small manufacturing supplier that had won a judgment worth $58,000 against a company that later went bankrupt and reorganized under a new name. The firm had pursued it for exactly 4 months before Frank Delgado personally signed off on writing it off as a loss. You recognized the debtor's new company name immediately. It was still operating 3 miles from the office, under a slightly different name, with the same owner, the same address, and according to the county's business filings, healthy annual revenue. The debt had never actually disappeared. It had just been abandoned by the one law firm too proud to keep chasing it. You sat with that folder open on your desk for the rest of the afternoon, saying nothing to anyone. When Frank Delgado walked past at 4:45 p.m., he glanced at the papers spread in front of you and asked, in that same flat tone he always used, if you were finally learning to take your job seriously. You told him you were just filing. That night, you drove to the accounting department's archive room, the same kind of forgotten storage space where you had once found the cardboard box that started all of this. You found 7 more files just like it, all connected to the same law firm, all written off years earlier, all sitting there collecting dust because collecting them properly would have required more effort than anyone at that firm was willing to give. You called the firm's senior partner directly the following week, a man named Walter Griggs who barely knew your name despite you working there for 9 years. You asked him, plainly, if the firm would be willing to sell its interest in these abandoned judgments outright for a flat cash payment, instead of continuing to carry them as a loss on the books. He asked why you wanted them. You told him you had a small side practice buying old debt. He laughed, not unkindly, and said he didn't see the harm in it. The firm sold you the rights to all 8 judgments for $4,200 total, a number that meant nothing to a firm billing clients hundreds of dollars an hour, but represented, to you, roughly $187,000 in combined face value, now sitting quietly in your possession. Frank Delgado never found out where that money came from. He still tells new hires, to this day, that filing is where real careers begin. You never correct him. Priya Nair ran a small marketing consulting agency out of a rented office 2 floors above the same dentist clinic where you now kept your own workspace. She had 4 employees, a lease on a downtown suite that cost her $2,800 a month, and a client roster that looked impressive on paper, but paid slowly, sometimes not at all. You met her once in the shared parking lot, both of you locking your cars at the same time on a Tuesday morning. She mentioned, casually, that one of her biggest clients still owed her $14,000 for a 6-month marketing contract completed the previous year, and that she had already spent more in legal fees trying to collect it than the debt was worth. She kept the office lease anyway. She kept the same downtown address, the same conference room she rarely used, because she believed it made her look successful to new clients walking through the door. Meanwhile, the $14,000 owed to her sat completely dead, doing nothing, worth nothing, because collecting it required time she didn't have and confidence she wasn't willing to spend. Currently, unpaid civil judgments in the United States often sit uncollected for years after the original creditor decides the cost of chasing the money outweighs the value of actually getting it back. That gap between what people are legally owed and what they actually collect is where you live. You do not operate the way most people assume a business runs. You do not have a storefront. You do not have a business card with your name printed in bold letters. You do not appear in court yourself, ever. Every judgment you purchase gets filed and processed through one of 3 separate limited liability companies, each one registered to a different mailing address, each one designed so that no single name, including yours, ever appears attached to more than a handful of cases at once. You never aggressively chase a single debtor to the point of threatening their home or their paycheck outright. You have learned over 11 years that a person offered a small, manageable payment plan will quietly pay for years without complaint, while a person threatened with garnishment will disappear entirely, change jobs, change addresses, and cost you far more in tracking fees than the original debt was worth. You never let your bank statement show the word collections. Every payment that comes and gets logged as an internal transfer between LLCs before it ever reaches an account with your actual name attached to it. Priya Nair, 3 weeks after that conversation in the parking lot, finally gave up trying to collect her own $14,000 and wrote it off as a business loss on her taxes. She kept the downtown lease. She kept the conference room. She told her employees business was steady. You never told her what you do. You just nodded, said that sounded rough, and got back into your Honda Civic. Your mother, Carol, is 61 years old and still works 4 shifts a week as a cashier at a Giant Eagle on Waterloo Road, standing on the same worn rubber floor mat for 8 hours at a time, scanning groceries for people half her age. She has worked there for 19 years. Her feet ache by the 3rd shift of every week, a dull ache she has stopped mentioning because mentioning it never changed anything. You call her every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. It is a habit neither of you has ever needed to schedule. 3 months ago, you started sending her a check every month, $400, mailed in a plain white envelope with no note attached. You told her it was a bonus from picking up extra shifts at your job. She never asked which job, because in her mind, you have always had a job, something steady but unremarkable, the kind of thing you don't bring up much at family dinners. She has never once asked to see your bank account. She has never once asked what LLCs mean, or what a judgment is, or why you spend your afternoons on the phone with strangers instead of clocking in somewhere at 9 a.m. like everyone else she knows. Last Sunday, her voice sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with her shift. She told you she worried about you. She said it quietly, not as an accusation, just as something she needed to say out loud. She said she wished, sometimes, that you had taken the apprenticeship her cousin offered you at 22. The union electrician position with the pension and the steady paycheck every 2 weeks. She said she didn't understand what you did for money, and that not understanding it kept her up some nights. You told her you were fine. You did not tell her about the 14 folders in your locked drawer. You did not tell her about the $1,300,000 sitting across your linked accounts, built one abandoned debt at a time, one quiet phone call at a time, over 11 years she has known nothing about. There was a long pause on the line, filled only with the sound of her television playing faintly in the background. Some evening news program, she keeps on for the noise more than the content. You told her you would call her again next week. She said okay. Neither of you said anything else before the call ended. You sat there afterward for a while, phone still in your hand, the screen gone dark, thinking about the $400 sitting in an envelope on her kitchen counter right now. Money she believes came from overtime. Money she will never trace back to a stranger's unpaid debt 3 counties away. The knowing doesn't make her worry easier. You sit alone in the office above the dentist clinic long after the last appointment downstairs has ended. The building quiet except for the soft tick of the radiator cooling in the corner. The manila folders are stacked exactly where you left them, 14 across, each one a small, sealed piece of someone else's forgotten mistake. Each one worth more than your mother makes in a year standing on a rubber mat scanning groceries. You think about the $400 envelope sitting on her kitchen counter right now. You think about the union apprenticeship she still brings up sometimes, the steady paycheck, the pension, the life she pictured for you at 22, a life with a name on a door and a title people could understand at a glance. You never took that path. You took the cardboard box instead, the one nobody wanted, the one Frank Delgado walked past for years without a second thought, the one that turned into $1,300,000 spread across 3 quiet LLCs that carry your name on no public document anyone could easily find. Nobody driving past your Honda Civic in the Giant Eagle parking lot would guess any of this. Nobody watching you sit on a tailgate at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning would guess it either. Deshaun Ferris still thinks you do nothing. Marcus Whitfield still thinks his leased truck means he is ahead. Frank Delgado still tells new hires that filing is where real careers begin. Still has no idea that the file clerk he dismissed for 9 years quietly built something his entire firm walked past and left for dead. None of them know. Your mother does not know either. And some nights that fact sits heavier on you than any number in any account ever could. She worries about a version of your life that stopped being true nearly a decade ago, and you have never found a way to tell her the truth without also explaining 11 years of buying strangers' debts, negotiating with people at their lowest financial moments, building something quiet and legal and strange that she would need time to understand, time you have never been sure how to give her over a Sunday phone call. So you let her worry. You let her believe the envelope comes from overtime. You tell yourself, most nights, that this is protecting her, that the truth would only confuse her, that some comfort is better delivered without an explanation attached. Other nights, usually late, usually alone in this office with the radiator ticking and the folders stacked beside you, you wonder if you are protecting her at all, or simply protecting yourself from having to explain a version of success that doesn't look like anything she was ever taught to recognize. You reach over and close the folder on top of the stack, the one from this afternoon's call. The man who swore he would never pay and will likely mail his first $50 payment within the week. The way they almost always do once the shouting stops and the math sets in. You slide the drawer shut. The metal clicks quietly into place. You reach for the desk lamp, the only light left on in the room, and switch it off. The office goes dark except for the faint orange glow of a streetlight bleeding through the blinds, falling in thin lines across the desk, the drawer, the outline of everything you've built that no one in your life has ever fully seen. If the person who loves you most never understands what winning even looks like, did you actually win anything at all? The drawer stays locked.